What is this?
Why, this is the Lost and Gone podcast.
Welcome to Die!
Welcome. This is Grim, and I'm going to share with you a tale of what has never been and what could have been. Let us see what has never been. Walk down the hall with me and take a face from the ancient gallery. Let us begin with a story about the Man of Steel. He's faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings with a single bound. The infant of Krypton is now the Man of Steel.
I've got balls of steel.
Superman is arguably one of the most culturally significant superheroes of all time, with his iconic outfit of red and blue with his cape waving in the wind. Although Superman has many different abilities, such as ice breath, laser eyes, X-ray vision, super strength, and flight, well, actually Superman wasn't going to be granted the ability of flight. It only happened because of a miscommunication between the creators and a licensed radio show. Back in the 1940s, it was common for all sorts of media to have a radio adaptation. Anything from horror stories to books, it seems like we've always been listening to each other tell stories. But does that mean that there was a whole civilization of flying, super strong aliens out there? I mean, we all know about Kryptonite, which is a fragment of Superman's world, which is his only known weakness. Could you imagine if you were a god until someone showed up with some quartz? Every basic bitch into crystals would be able to kill you. Not much of a superpower then, is it? I mean, could it get any weirder? Oh yes, it can. What if those quartz crystals were rose quartz? Those who know their history know the mythos behind the different kinds of kryptonite, and also some of the weirder aspects behind its creation. So let's talk about why this is important to Superman and some of the controversy surrounding it. This means it's time for a brief history lesson about the Silver Age of comics. Now, this isn't a history podcast, so I'll explain it in a few words. The Silver Age of comics is considered a renaissance for comic books and the revival of the familiar archetype of superheroes and villains, going back to more traditional roots. Due to ongoing controversy over comics and their influence upon the children of the time, the Comic Code Authority was made, and no comic books that were seen as too violent or mature would be allowed publication. Now, how does this manifest into Superman's kryptonite? Well, not everyone is a fan of censorship, and that's how some of the writers of Superman's comics felt. And they decided to try to subtly add in some rather controversial topics, and that happened in the form of different colored kryptonite. One of which was pink, and there's no easy way to say this, but it made Superman become a homosexual. What were they thinking? How many jokes could you make about this?
Hey, well, I'd like to thank Jeff for letting me do a set here tonight at the lovely Golden Corral. Give him a round of applause. Well, I bet some of y'all are from Metropolis. Where are my Metropolites at? Well, there we go. Yeah. This one's for you. You know, you just might be a Kryptonian if you see the color red and you kill everyone. You might just be a Kryptonian if you see the color gold and take up a second job. Yeah. You just might be a Kryptonian if you see the color pink and you stop looking for your Lois and start looking for your Lewis in the inner city.
You know I have supersonic hearing, right? Don't quit your day job, friend. He stole my bit. Sometimes it seems like no matter what medium he's presented in, they just can't get Superman right. However, these failures and cold receptions hasn't stopped Hollywood from meddling with the Superman IP and making some downright awful movies. But you know what is even worse? When there was an idea so rancid, so putrid, so vile, that no one believed in it. And that's exactly what happened to the mysterious movie Superman Lives. So why is this part of this discussion? Well, in order to understand the situation, you need to go back to the time period this movie was being developed in, which is around roughly 1996 through 1998, which starts with the death of Superman, or it was supposed to be based off of that, which is an interesting storyline where Superman is ultimately killed by his ultimate rival, the Doomsday, and is later resurrected by Kryptonian technology. This was a decision made on a whim to punish readers for taking Superman for granted because of a lack of sales in his comics, which must mean that they just love their fans. However, this ploy would work, and the media ate up the death of the American icon. This is important to Superman Lives because of the importance to the script and how it started out, with the working title of Superman Reborn, which ended up getting a very much needed rewrite by both Dan Gilroy and some saved parts from Kevin Smith, who is a huge Superman fan. In the documentary The Death of Superman Lives, What Happened?, Kevin Smith discusses a brief memory of the initial script in which Superman goes to see a therapist and, quote-unquote, has a "I'm Superman" discussion. It would seem that the original script probably was far from what we would normally expect. However, this is where a new challenger approaches. Jon Peters was the producer of the film, and he had some less than great ideas about casting, which led to him pondering on who would fill the role of Superman. And I'm going to paraphrase here, but according to the writer Kevin Smith, Peters wanted someone not pinkin', more for the streets, which could mean only one actor to rule them all.
Nicolas Cage.
Now, the producer behind this film, Peters, apparently wasn't a fan of Superman's original outfit, and they wanted something more edgy, so they designed a new outfit for Superman to wear. Now, I could do you the disservice of describing this to you, dear listener, but instead, I highly recommend that you quickly open up your browser of choice and look up Superman Lives Nicolas Cage. Go ahead. I'll wait. Well, if you had the time to look, I know you saw the same cursed image I did, and I'm sorry, but you must suffer with me.
You will suffer with me, and then one day, you will see this pendant again, and you will remember everything you saw and felt tonight. You will remember all the years of anger and pain. And when you do, David, please, come to me.
But now, I want you to think about the average day on the job as a concept artist. You're in the studio as a hysterical paroxysm seizes your hand and produces some of your best work. Perhaps even some of the best you've ever done. All of a sudden, your boss and his children walk into the studio. Then they begin to say they don't like your drawings because they're dumb. And then your boss tells you to throw it out and start all over again. This scenario seems to be some of the few terrible things supposedly encountered by the artists working for Jon Peters. Then, let's imagine you're in the studio redoing your magnum opus, and your boss shows up with one of his dates, and he proceeds to demonstrate his
Martial arts prowess.
on you. And while I'm at it, they also were going to have Brainiac in the film to fight Superman. Now, who were they thinking about playing that role? Well, first, I have to describe to you the scene that this villain would have appeared in. Okay, you're in the Arctic, and there's two giant polar bears guarding the Fortress of Solitude, and then those polar bears are descended upon by a mechanical spider with the head of Christopher Walken? I can only imagine how this would have played out.
Can you believe this? Superman needs bodyguards. Why is he super then? Come out, Superman. I've killed your guard dogs. Don't make me wait, or I'm gonna put on the weapon of choice again.
Not the bears!
Hey, can somebody fix this guy?
Cut.
Well, aside from this, the producer was also adamant that Superman fight a giant spider. Too many spiders might have just caused an identity crisis.
Who do you think you are? I am!
But this is merely the tip of the iceberg, and there is a huge rabbit hole to descend into, with the ending being merely chalked up to three things. 1. Tim Burton. 2. Tim Burton. And 3. Edward Superman. Well, let me explain that Warner Brothers was weary of Tim Burton's ability to make movies that recoup the cost of making them, which, if anybody knows anything about Tim Burton...
Yes, I have banged hundreds of breasts internationally, but know this, I wrapped my rascal 2 times.
This seems like the most foolish statement to come from anybody. So they decided, unfortunately, to pull the funding for the movie, and then decided to move forward with another project going on at the same time, by the name of Wild West, starring...
Keep my wife's name out your fucking mouth!
Will Smith. All jokes accounted for, Superman has always struggled to branch off into other media. It would seem that it's time to talk about another legend in the Superman saga. Somewhere in an alternate universe, there's a long, golden-haired Superman, who also happens to have Nicolas Cage's face.
There's a monster outside my room. Can I have a glass of water?
Just kidding, we're not here to talk about the Flash. However, it would seem that cameo did indeed bring back bitter memories for Tim Burton, and he was livid that Hollywood would take his ideas and still use them. But this is the type of thing that happens in the dark behind certain projects. It's not uncommon for projects to take on many different iterations before settling on something entirely different. This leads us to ask the question of who was EIM and who was Sunsoft, or the Sun Electronics Company. However, we're going to save that story for another time when we discuss the story behind the Superman game that there never was. Sunman and Kenji Eno. Finally, my favorite part, the ending. Well, I guess first things first, a special thanks to my friend Alan for bringing this topic to my attention. I will honestly say it was a bigger rabbit hole than I could have imagined. Now, to give credit where credit is due, my brother had told me after I penned my sketch for the comedy bit that Jeff Foxworthy was now a spokesperson for Golden Corral, and it made me realize that would be a perfect mediocre venue for a comedy scene. So, I asked one of the funniest guys I know, Toby Von Doom of the Secret Levels podcast, to tone his comedy down and perform a set. Thanks for getting the roof raised, Toby. Also, a special thanks to my brother for doing his best Christopher Walken impression and making the scene come together. Thanks, Alistair. It was awesome, man. Which was semi-fictionalized, and I added in the weapon of choice bit because there's a whole damn music video out there with Christopher Walken dancing his ass off to it. I must also thank my friend Letko of the Afterglow podcast for giving me his voice clip to use in my Superman track. I also want to thank the late but great Ray Bradbury for always explaining his stories. I may have just picked up on this habit. And also a special thanks to Melissa. You know who you are, you know what you do. Either way, you can find me on Facebook at the Lost and Gone podcast, or you can find me in the Secret Levels Discord. Come hang out with the fam.